who will stand up and make you proud to be an American again. I grew up as a child of the 80s, right? And I was proud of Ronald Reagan. I was proud of where we could go. And that is exactly the kind of man that Ron DeSantis is. And I'm so proud to be around this state supporting him. Please give a warm welcome to the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis.
Great job. Thank you. Thanks so much. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Chip. Great introduction. Thanks for your support. I got to just say, as governor of Florida, in the wintertime, normally when I want to talk to Iowans, I just go to Marco Island or Bonita Springs because I get pretty much half the Midwest down there all the way through the winter, and I can understand why. It's great to be at Machine Shed. You know, my wife, we have our 3 kids with us. The other day, she said, because my events actually ended at like 5 o'clock, which normally we go a little later. I think it was Sunday night. And she said, I'm going to take the kids, I think I'm going to take them to Cracker Barrel. And that's a big deal in the Southeast, and we're big fans. But, you know, I was at an event, a bunch of other people. I was like, hey, my wife wants to go to Cracker Barrel. What do you think about me saying Machine Shed? They're like, oh, Machine Shed's so much better. Machine Shed's so much better. So we went, and I'll tell you, I give it 2 thumbs up. Really, really good. And the thing is, the stuff you can buy, my kids got some great trinkets, including my son is 5. It's like a sports nut. He got an Iowa State football field checkerboard. So I don't know that he knew checkers, but now he does. So he's really excited about doing that and everything. So I was thinking back, given where we are, to a debate that 3 of the founding fathers had. It was Benjamin Rush, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin. And their debate was over what was the world's oldest profession. And Benjamin Rush was a doctor, so he said the world's oldest profession is a physician because Eve was cut out of Adam's rib. Thomas Jefferson, of course, who designed Monticello and other things, said no, that's not true. The world's oldest profession is the architect because it's the architect that brought order out of all the chaos throughout the universe. And Benjamin Franklin said no, that's not true. The world's oldest profession is the politician. Who do you think created the chaos in the first place? And I think what we find ourselves in is so many of the problems that this country faces are self-inflicted by out-of-touch, cynical, and corrupt political class. Some of it's corrupted by special interests. Some of it's corrupted by ideology. But they are instituting policies that are harming this country. We saw it on the stage a couple weeks ago when I debated Gavin Newsom from California. This is naturally, when I was in the Navy, I got orders to go to Coronado Naval Amphibious Base, and I was a Floridian, born and raised. I had not spent any time in California. So I get out there, and I check into the bachelor officer quarters. And first thing as a Floridian, I look for the air conditioning unit. And they're like, no, there's no air conditioning here. I'm like, what? They're like, you don't need it. Just open the window. So you open the window, just nice, fresh breeze. And then as a Floridian, I look, I say, wait a minute, there's no screen on the window because we have bugs. You know, you don't want to do that. They're like, no, you don't need it. There's no bugs. And I'm just like, man, this is really, really nice. And I got to know, like, how naturally beautiful the state is. And I'll never forget coming back from Iraq after being in that desert, landing right there in Coronado, Pacific Ocean. You just feel so nice. And I'm like, man, I don't like high taxes, but I understand why people would want to live here. This is 15 or so years ago. And yet now they have led the nation in people leaving the state. Massive exodus of people on net. They had never lost population for their whole history up until his governorship. And it's because of the leftist ideology and the policies that they're imposing. Yes, bad on taxes, bad on crime, bad on homelessness. I even had during the debate, I had to pull out a map in San Francisco and they actually chart this. Every time someone reports human feces in public, they report, and this group plots it on a map. And if you see the big thing of San Francisco, it's just dot, 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 all over the place. And I actually saw this firsthand. I was there a few months ago. Within 5 minutes, I saw somebody relieving themselves on the sidewalk. And so you see that. You see the drugs. You saw their COVID authoritarianism. You see them using schools to indoctrinate kids. No wonder why people are leaving. But that debate was important because what Biden is doing, and it may not be Biden that's the candidate, it may be some of these other Democrats, That is the direction they want to take the whole country. A second term will be the Californication of the entire United States. And people say, Florida's so great, everything, you guys are doing such a great job. Why would you run? Well, look, we got to have a country in which people don't feel like they have to flee to Florida for refuge. Every state should be a free state. Every state should have opportunities to do well, but we're going to need to reverse these policies. Right now, our trajectory is that we are going to be the first generation of Americans to leave to our kids and grandkids in America less prosperous and less free than the one we inherited. And we would be the first generation of Americans to do that. And it would be breaking faith with every generation of Americans since the Revolutionary War. They always stood up. They always found a way to sacrifice so that future generations would have opportunity and would have freedom. And that's why I'm running for president, because this trajectory of our country, this decline that we see ourselves in, is not inevitable. This is a choice. It's a choice that we will make. It's a choice you will make here in Iowa. With the chance to change the trajectory of the country with the caucus on January 15th. We have it within our power to reverse this trend. We have it within our power to give a new birth of freedom throughout this country. We have it within our power to usher in a revival of the American spirit. And if we do anything less than that, then we will not be doing our part to step up and defend this country when freedom was threatened. And there's a number of things you need in a president and somebody who you're going to do. One, you need somebody that's going to actually fight for you. A lot of these Republicans, they get elected, they go to Washington, and the Democrats steamroll them. The media steamrolls them. They're not willing to dig in and actually have fights when it's tough. I have a record of doing that in ways that few governors have ever been able to. During COVID, when we were standing against Fauci and standing against the media and standing against the left, I had everyone coming after me. No governor faced more incoming than I did during COVID. A lot of my friends and supporters were telling me that I was making big mistake politically. I wouldn't be able to recover from it. But if you're willing to fight for people, you got to be willing to do it when it's tough. And I just believe that I had to care more about protecting the jobs and the freedoms of the people I was elected to serve than I cared about protecting my own political hide. And so we chose freedom over Fauciism. We made sure to do the right thing. And this country would have been in an abyss had Florida not led, as well as your governor and a handful of other bright spots. But it was a dark place for this country. We did the right thing, and that's because we were willing to fight. Also, as a dad, we have a first grader, kindergartner, pre-K, 3. My wife and I just believe kids should be able to go to school, watch cartoons, just be kids without having an agenda shoved down their throat. It is wrong to teach a first grader that they can change genders. It's wrong to teach a third grader that they were born in the wrong body. And we decided to do something about that. Not that it had really taken off in Florida, but you look around the country, we saw what was happening. So we did legislation to say we're not doing the sexualization of curriculum, particularly in these early grades. We're going to stand for parents, and that's the way it's going to be. The left didn't like that. The media didn't like that, of course, which was to be expected. But then we had our most powerful company, Disney, come out and work to try to tank the bill. And in Florida, usually when they weigh in publicly like that, people get very nervous. Politicians don't want to stand up because of the power that they bring to bear. But again, it's like, why are you in office? I'm in office to fight for kids. I'm in office to fight for families. And if I can't stand up in that situation, then that's not somebody that you want to have being in office in the first place. So I took an oath to support and defend the people that I represented, not to subcontract out my leadership to a woke corporation based in California. So we fought and we won that fight, and Florida's better off as a result of us digging in and defeating Disney on the gender ideology. You also need somebody who's going to win fights, win elections, and Republicans have been losing elections all across the country in races we should have won. In Florida, we not only won, we won the biggest Republican victory in the history of the state in any governor's race. Since the 1840s, we did the best. And that's because of the results. That's because people saw that we would fight for them, and they understood that I had their back. That's what we need to do nationwide. But I think even more important than that, because winning an election's great. Winning an election will mean that the other side can't do damage, But we got some folks that get elected to these various offices. It's almost like they're potted plants. They don't want to do anything. They don't really want to engage in any of these fights. And then what do you end up accomplishing? You've got to actually deliver these big wins on all these issues. And of everybody running, I'm the only candidate who has delivered on 100% of his promises. I'm the only candidate who has beaten the people that are causing so much problems in our country. We beat the teachers' unions by enacting universal school choice. We beat Fauci on COVID. We beat Soros on crime by removing 2 of his handpicked radical prosecutors. We beat the Democrats on election integrity and security by banning ballot harvesting and Zuckerbucks and ensuring universal voter ID. We beat the left on banning China from purchasing land in the state of Florida and ejecting them from our universities. And so on issue after issue, I'm beating the left. And if you look now in the state of Florida, we used to be a perfectly competitive state politically. The Democratic Party lies in ruins in the state of Florida because we won time after time after time. That's what we need to do nationally. You know, I look right now, the left in this country is more powerful today than they were the day Donald Trump took office. That's just the reality. He did not beat the left. He had some successes, his regulatory policy stuff, great. You know, I was proud to support all that. But in terms of the overall fight for the future of this country, the left has gained steam over the last 7 years. The left is on offense in most parts of this country. Maybe not in Iowa, certainly not in Florida, but nationally, they are the ones that have been winning. We can't let that happen. We need to be the ones that are winning, and I'm the guy that can get that done as President of the United States. And then finally, we need leadership. Leadership is about articulating a vision for the future of this country and implementing that vision, even when it's not easy, especially when it's not easy, and ensuring that every single day when you get out of bed and you go to work, it's all going to be about trying to push you off course. The media, the left, the bureaucracy, everybody is going to be trying to stop us from achieving what we know we need to achieve for this country. You got to have your compass set on true north. You got to understand what's important, and it's got to be about you and your families in this country. It cannot be about me as an individual or anybody else as an individual. I'm not running for my issues. I'm running for your issues. That is the type of leadership that we need. We were able to do that in Florida. We need to do it nationally, just like President Reagan did when he was in. And I think you need to do it over a 2 4-year terms. I don't know that a one term is going to be able to get the job done. If you really want to change the trajectory of the country, if you really want this to stick going forward, that's what you're going to have to do. So I'll be able to say after 2 terms of serving as your president, I'll be able to say that we've actually accomplished all the things we've been talking about. We'll be able to say that we restored the American dream in this country. Families can get ahead again. You're not going to have inflation and interest rates and Bidenomics and bureaucracy and red tape weighing you down. We'll have opened up all our energy for production so that we're lowering gas prices, lowering energy costs, and making sure that this country is dominant and independent in the realm of energy. We'll have fought with Chip Roy against some of his colleagues to stop spending this country into oblivion with the massive amount of debt that has driven up the prices that you're suffering under. In Florida, I vetoed billions of dollars in wasteful spending. We reduced the state's debt, paid off 25% of the state's debt just since I've been governor. So it can be done, but you gotta have leadership. We're also going to be able to tell you that we have succeeded in restoring the sovereignty of our country at our southern border. We will have stopped the Mexican drug cartels cold in their tracks. Yes, build a border wall, which I think is important. Send people back who come to this country illegally, and ensure that we do not have tens of thousands of our fellow citizens being poisoned to death by fentanyl that's coming in through the southern border. We're also going to be able to say, as the only veteran running, I think it's important that we revitalize our nation's military. And yes, we need resources, we need more firepower, but we also need to change the culture. No more woke agenda in the military. No more social experimentation. Focus on the mission. Promote based on merit. That will increase morale. It will increase recruiting. And that's what we need to do. And if we can't even do that, then we're not going to get done what we need to do to deter our enemies like China. We must make sure that this century is the 21st century is an American century, not a Chinese century. We're also going to ensure that schools in this country educate kids but don't indoctrinate kids. We're going to support the rights of parents to direct the education and upbringing of their children. We're going to foster civics and appreciation of the Constitution and what it means to be an American in schools all across the country. And we are going to do like we did in Florida and reform these universities, which have gotten so out of control over so many years. We're not going to be funding them with your money if they're pursuing an ideological agenda. We're going to make sure that in red cities, red states, blue states, criminals are held accountable for their crimes again. We're not going to let the inmates run the asylum. We're not going to let rogue prosecutors put people back on the street. Families are going to be able to raise their kids in peace and security once again. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, we're going to restore the U.S. Constitution to the central place in our national life that it deserves to be. That means a limited government that works alongside us, not an unlimited, unaccountable bureaucracy that imposes its will on us and is weaponized against us. We are going to end weaponization of federal agencies like the DOJ and the FBI and the IRS. We are going to bring accountability to agencies involved with the disastrous COVID-19 policies like the CDC, the FDA, and the NIH. We are going to return this government to its rightful owners, which is we, the American people. And we're going to do a lot more than that, but if we just do that, we'll be able to say that we restored America to what President Reagan called the shining city on a hill. We will have turned her over to the next generation stronger, more prosperous, and more free than when we inherited it. And that is really what the task ahead of us is. Our founding fathers understood that every generation was going to have to fight for freedom. When Benjamin Franklin walked out of the Constitutional Convention, he was asked, did you give us a republic or a monarchy? He said, a republic if you can keep it. They understood that this was going to be an ongoing thing. They also understood that freedom would ultimately be decided in the United States of America. And so I'm motivated by the task at hand. I understand what we need to do to make sure that my kids and your kids and grandkids have better futures. But I'm also motivated by the debt of gratitude we owe to people that have come before us. I've flown into Washington, D.C. over the years, and there's a particular path that you can take going into Reagan Airport. And if you look out the left side of the plane, you see very close views of the National Mall, the Lincoln Memorial, the reflecting pool, the Washington Monument, then perched on top of the hill, the beautiful U.S. Capitol building. And you feel a sense of pride as an American because those monuments symbolize the principles and the ideals that have made our country unique. But having done that trip a few times, I soon realized that the best monuments to freedom were not found on the National Mall. Because if you looked out the other side of the plane, you looked over the Potomac River, you saw a series of small, nondescript monuments orderly arranged over the rolling hills of a place called Arlington National Cemetery. And it occurred to me then, and I believe now, you can have the best Constitution in the world, you can have the best Declaration of Independence in the world. These things do not run on autopilot. They require every generation of Americans to step up and defend freedom when it's at risk. And yes, sometimes put on a uniform, risk your life, and even give the last full measure of devotion for service to this country. Now, we're not called upon to make sacrifices of that nature here in this political season, but what we are called upon to do is to do justice to the sacrifices of those who've come before us. We have a responsibility to preserve what George Washington called the sacred fire of liberty. This is a fire that burned in Independence Hall in 1776 when 56 men pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to establish a new nation conceived in liberty. It's a fire that burned at a cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, when our nation's first Republican president pledged our nation to a new birth of freedom. It's a fire that burned on the shores of Normandy, France, when a merry band of brothers defeated Nazi Germany and preserved liberty throughout the world. It's a fire that burned in 1987 at the foot of the Berlin Wall when a resolute Republican president stood in front of that wall and said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," and eventually led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. This is our responsibility, to carry that torch and to preserve that sacred fire of liberty. It's not a responsibility I shy away from. It's a responsibility that I welcome. We are up to the task to save this country. as your candidate for president, I will get the job done next November. Not just me, but with all the other offices, the Congress, the Senate, the state legislatures. As a leader, I'll always conduct myself in a way that you can be proud of. And as your president, I promise you this, I will not let you down. Thank you all. God bless. Happy to take some questions. I'll repeat it.
Thank you for being here, Governor. I have two questions, if you would. First is, what do you see as the role of the federal government in protecting the sanctity of life? And then second, what are your views on convention of states?
Okay, so the question on right to life and then the Article 5. I'm for Article 5. Florida has certified Article 5. I think that if you really want to reform Washington, you can elect reformers who will make a difference, but the long-term trend is bad. You do need to have structural reform. We need term limits for members of Congress. We need a balanced budget requirement for the Constitution. We need a line item veto for the President of the United States. You know, I can veto things in Florida within the budget without having to veto the whole budget. Just imagine if you could do that in Washington, the President, we wouldn't be funding things like transgenderism in Bangladesh or whatever the heck they do with your money. It's crazy what they do. So I think you need to do those types of reforms. I don't think Congress would likely enact any of those. I know they came close to doing a balanced budget amendment back in the 90s. I don't think they would ever do term limits, but I think it's something that's really, really important. And then, look, on right to life, we have responsibility to promote a culture of life. I know there's some people that are saying that that's not something that's good. Donald Trump, he attacked heartbeat bills like Iowa did and like we signed in Florida. He said that's a terrible, terrible thing to do to protect life where you have an unborn with a heartbeat. Now, he was saying at the March for Life in January of 2020 something much different. If you go back and read that speech or watch that speech, he was saying that life is a gift from God, that unborn are made in the image of God, and that having protections for life was a noble calling. Now, I don't know if he didn't mean what he said then, or if he's now flipped to a much different position now. But what he is now doing is being used by the left, and they are weaponizing that against pro-lifers. Gavin Newsom in our debate cited Donald Trump to attack me for being pro-life. So I think what he's been doing is reckless. I think he has not provided an explanation. Of course, he won't debate on that. But I think any pro-life voter that sees what Trump has done, you can guarantee you he is not going to have your back at all going forward.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing and add a little color because, courage when it's not in public display is to me when it's critically important. And what some of you may not know is, when all these political super PACs and stuff are being created, there's a lot of money that flies around from some of your, I'll call them kind of certain, donors out of Wall Street and New York and so forth. And when some major donors were throwing a whole lot of money towards the governor and PACs to say, hey, why don't you back off of this abortion issue in Florida? The governor said, no, I'm the governor of Florida, and I'm not going to do that. There's a lot of politicians who would have said, all right, maybe I'll take a step back. I'd love to have, $100 million sitting in a super PAC. I just think these kinds of things matter. They matter when the rubber meets the road, when you have somebody who's convicted to do the right thing, but importantly, convicted to defend Florida and Florida's right to do that and to have that debate. Have a heartbeat bill. A heartbeat bill, which, by the way, gets us in line with Western civilization and, European countries that had similar standards so that we can then restore the debate to the people. The Supreme Court gave it back to the people in the states, and we can have that debate at states and figure out how to deal with the cultural life and, importantly, protect not just babies but mamas and make sure that we've got a bubble of community protection around families to encourage adoption and to stand up for a culture of life and lead on the issue in a positive way.
Endangered himself or others, that I think the president said, I think it's best that we take the guns first and then due process. Well, yesterday the Colorado Supreme Court took him off the ballot, the primary ballot, without due process, without showing that he participated in insurrection. I think that's quite ironic. Maybe you have a comment on that, one of you. I'm really concerned that going forward with all these 91 indictments and the federal government having a 91% conviction rate, that the battle for the next year is going to be very distracting and not on the issues that you talk about if we don't go with somebody with the energy that you have. Thank you.
Well, great. Well, first, I mean, I think, yes, I mean, I think Donald Trump, when he said that his policy on firearms was to take the guns first and that he wanted to do due process later, that is unconstitutional. That's unacceptable. And honestly, it doesn't even reach the Second Amendment issue. They can't take any of your property without due process. They can't come in and take a TV without due process. That's the whole purpose of those amendments, is to be able to ensure that your life, liberty, and property are secured from government intrusion. And yes, if you violate a law, they go through process. There can be penalties. But saying that he would take guns first and due process later, that is not something that makes sense. And look, he has not been somebody that has typically believed in Second Amendment rights. I mean, he took positions, but he flirted with major firearm bans. He did stuff through the bureaucracy, which was unconstitutional and has been found that in the courts. So I think in terms of Second Amendment, if that's something that you care about, if he could even get elected, I think that I do not think that he would be somebody that would be dependable on defending your rights, because I don't think that that's honestly something that he believes in. But look, on all these things, what you're seeing the left do is they will use the power of the state to advance their agenda. And you see that with the Colorado Supreme Court. I mean, look, if somebody's convicted or something of some of these things, there was no trial on any of this. They basically just said, what, you can't be on the ballot? I mean, how does that work? What's the limiting principle for that? Why could we just say that Biden can't be on the ballot because he let in 8 million illegals into the country and violated the Constitution, which he has? Could we just say, oh, well, they have money coming to Hunter, whatever? So I think the U.S. Supreme Court is going to reverse that. But here's the larger thing of what the left and the media and the Democrats are doing. They're doing all this stuff to basically solidify support in the primary for him, get him into the general, and the whole general election is going to be all this legal stuff. And look, it's unfair. They're abusing power 100%. But the question is that going to work? And I think they have a playbook that unfortunately will work, and it'll give Biden or the Democrat or whoever the ability to skate through this thing. That's their plan. That's what they want. What they don't want is to have somebody like me who will make the election not about all those other issues, but will make the election about the failures of Biden, the failures of the left, and how we're going to be able to turn the country around. If that's how the election's framed, we will win. But they are setting this stuff up. I mean, how do you have the timing the way they've done it with all these things? They're doing this for a reason. They have a plan in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. And do we want to have 2024 to be about this trial, that case, this case, having to put hundreds of millions of dollars into legal stuff? Or do we want 2024 to be about your issues, about the country's future, with a nominee that's going to be able to prosecute that case against the left, just like I've been able to do in Florida? That is a path to winning. And I think they're putting us, what the media and the left are doing with all these stunts, whether it's the Colorado Supreme Court, whether it's others. And there's going to be other Supreme Courts that are going to probably try to do this too. Maybe they'll wait for the end of these trials if there's conviction, but the liberal courts are going to try to do this. So that's what we'd be walking into, and it's not fair, but that doesn't give us our best chance to be able to win and to be able to do this in a way. It's a hard enough job as it is to do. To have all the distractions, I just don't think it's going to be something that's going to be feasible. Chip?
Yeah, just real quick, two things can be true at the same time. It can be an outrage what happened in Colorado, and it is outrageous. The Colorado Supreme Court should not have done that. But it can also be true that I don't want to be looking backwards and constantly talking about those things, and that's what we're going to be doing all year. I want to be able to move forward. I want somebody who can serve for 8 years. I want to go win on every issue under the sun where our lives are being attacked, where our internal combustion engine is being assaulted. You're going to lose the internal combustion engine. We in Texas, in terms of producing, petroleum-based products, ethanol products here, we're losing that. They're going to have a rule put in place this spring saying the entire fleet of vehicles is going to be 2/3 electric vehicles by 2032. How do you all feel about that? Do you think that's useful for you? Do you like having to stop in freezing cold and waiting for the battery to charge up while you're waiting to do that while the infrastructure gets built? Do you think that's good for our economy and our national security? That's an existential threat to our life. I want to be talking about that. I don't want to be talking about the Colorado Supreme Court. I will defend the former president. I will go, take on the Colorado Supreme Court because we need to. But I want to focus on these issues and go win on those issues like Governor DeSantis.
And I mean, you think about just the electric vehicle stuff. So, I was doing this thing with Newsom. He did a requirement for electric vehicles. It hasn't taken effect yet, but all new cars at a certain point in the future must be electric in California. You're not even going to be able to allowed to buy internal combustion. So they announced that to great fanfare. A couple days later, the state put out a notice. All EV holders, do not plug in your vehicle. We do not have enough capacity on the power grid. So they're attacking reliable energy that you need to fuel the power grid while increasing demand to use electric because of the vehicles. They have blackouts all the time there. You will have rolling blackouts throughout this country. I mean, basic quality of life will be destroyed as a result of some of this stuff. And if they get another term, all that stuff is going to be implemented. I mean, that is going to happen. They're doing it through the bureaucracy, which I don't think is constitutional. And so the stakes are high on a whole host of things to be able to fight and win. We have the issues on our side. But look, the 2022 election, I think, is instructive because we should have won a massive wave. Yep. Biden was unpopular. The inflation was accelerating higher in November of 22 than it is even now. The border, of course, wide open. Crime, all these problems. The country, clearly, people were dissatisfied. And yet, a certain number of voters, even believing that, still did not want to vote for Republican candidates. And I think the Democrats ran a playbook where they talked about a lot of these issues. They tried to link our candidates to things like January 6th, all that. And fair or not, those arguments worked on a certain amount of voters. They're going to run that same playbook again. The Democrats and the media are very quiet on some of this stuff because they want to see the primary end the way they want to. The minute that would be over, you're going to see scorched earth. I mean, you're going to see that, and they know, and I was laughing at this in 2022 because I was like, it's not going to work. People aren't going to vote for a Democrat when you have all these problems, and yet a lot of people did do that. So that's the warning. We know who the Democrats want to run against. We know who they don't want to run against, and so we have a chance to make that choice accordingly. Yes, sir.
A comment and then a question. I don't think you have to worry about the electric vehicle thing because physics will dictate what will happen with that. As far as I know, the government cannot repeal the laws of physics. So they may try, but it wouldn't work.
But they may bankrupt the automobile companies in the process. Yeah. So I agree. Yeah. Ultimately, you're right, but there'll be a lot of damage along the way.
The question, I want to pivot to economics. What is your economic agenda? There's not a problem that this country faces that can't be solved with more economic growth. And we have seen substandard growth for a long time. What are your thoughts about getting economic growth back to the 3%, 4% that it was before?
So when we rolled out our agenda, we said we need to get to 3%. We haven't been to 3% since before the financial crisis, 2008, consistently. When Trump was president, there was a lot of good things about the economy, but it was not high growth, all things considered. When you have more growth, clearly there's more opportunities, and that's great, higher standard of living. But it helps us solve our fiscal problems because, you'll have lower taxes, but then you will bring in revenue because of a bigger economic pie. That's what's happened in Florida. We've cut taxes every year, and yet we attract more people, we attract investment, our economic base gets broader and broader, and so we end up taking in all this revenue with lower rates because of the underlying health of the economy. That's why we're able to pay off 25% of our state's debt. And I also, when I took office, I think we were 21 million, 21 and a half. Now we're probably over 23 million people in just 5 years, the growth. I have to build roads. We have to build schools. I mean, there's certain things you have to do with that, and we've been able to do that and not miss a beat. So the framework that I did in Florida would be similar. How do you do growth? One, energy gives us an opportunity to increase growth. We have more reserves, like the Marcellus Shale, the Permian Basin, Alaska. We can be by far the dominant energy power in this world. We should never have to worry about Saudi Arabia or Venezuela or any of that to be able to do that. That's good for the economic base. It lowers costs, good for businesses. Getting the bureaucracy and the red tape off the back of the economy. Part of the reason why, what I hear from most people is the administrative state is their biggest problem, even more than things like taxes. So we've got to slay the administrative state. That's not something you just flip a switch. You got to have a very determined and disciplined executive to do that. We're going to do that. I'd like to get rid of the IRS and just have a single rate tax system. You look at what we have now, it's a disaster. So we got to work towards that. I got work in Congress to do to be able to get that done. So we're going to do that. And then stop spending so much money. We haven't had a president since Reagan who really worked hard to reduce spending. And Reagan was not necessarily successful with a lot of the domestic, but he was trying to do it. I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to be willing to veto legislation. I'm going to be willing to hold Congress accountable because the printing and borrowing and spending of money has led to a lot of the economic difficulties that we see here in this country right now.
Look, one final point, then I think this may have to be the last question. We'll take one more question to be the last one, which is to this point on, I want to go back to the electric vehicle point because joking aside, right, if we actually have a situation where in 8 years we have to be 2/3 electric vehicles, which is what the rule will be, the Toyota manufacturing plant in San Antonio, when I met with them, said the supply chains have to start in about a year. They have to start building out their manufacturing about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ahead of that. So we will be crushing our economy if we go down that road chasing that fool's errand. And so going back to the point of economic growth that the governor just laid out, we can have enormous economic growth if we get back to advancing and promoting clean burning American gas, having our economy built on reliable energy. By the way, none of those rules and regulations are going to dent CO2 production. They're not going to dent that. China has 1,100 coal-fired plants right now. We have 250. They're building 2 a week. We're building 0. Right? You want to know where CO2 is coming from? Look at China and India. And we're handicapping our economic growth, undermining our national security. Governor DeSantis will flip that on its head and give us a rebirth of economic growth so we can actually grow our way out of our debt problem, get jobs going again. Like in Texas, right, we're cranking. My school, I live in the fastest growing county in America, Hays County, Texas, southwest of Austin, Texas. It's been exploding. There are 6,000 kids in our high school because we can't build high schools fast enough right now because of economic growth. But we need that for the country. We need to have strong economic growth nationwide. And the other important piece to this is we need a strong Western Hemisphere standing against China for our own national security to reduce the pressure of immigration on our southern border, but have a strong Western Hemisphere so that we can have economic growth here and move manufacturing out of China and back to the United States and back to the Western Hemisphere to push back on China. And importantly, stop have Chinese Communist Party own farmlands and lands in this country.
Governor, I've been a Republican activist since the Nixon campaign in '72, as many people in this room have been. I voted for Trump in '16. I voted for him in 2020. I will not do it again. But some people in this room are not convinced to do otherwise. Tell us what we should talk about between now and the 15th of January. Is that I agree with you. I don't think that Mr. Trump can lead us to victory.
Great. Well, I would say a couple things. One, we do got to win. And I think the media has been trying to do polls saying, that Trump would win. First of all, a year out, they had Jimmy Carter beating Ronald Reagan by 24 points in December of '79. I would look at electoral track record, and I have the best electoral track record. I've always overperformed expectations, and I've always overperformed the polls. The polls didn't have me winning by 20. They had me winning, but a lot of them had me winning by 5 or 6. We won by 20. So we're going to get that job done. We're going to be able to appeal to the people that we need to. And in Florida, not only was I winning independents and women and Hispanic, all that, I got 97% of registered Republicans. That was a record. Normally if you get 90%, that's really good. I got 97%. That means almost anyone with an R by their name. So we unified the party more than anyone have. And I do worry with the Donald Trump candidacy, there are definitely some voters who voted twice for him who aren't going to do it again. And if he loses anything on the Republican side, Katie barred the door. That's going to be a gift for the Democrats. He will not be able to overcome getting 80% of Republicans instead of 90. And that's so what I say is a Trump candidacy is high risk because of the electoral issues, all the other issues that are going to be there front and center, which I think is unfortunate. I don't think it's fair, but it's reality. And there's so many different hurdles. The reward, though, I think is relatively low. He'd only be able to, if he could win, he'd only be able to serve one term. We've never had a newly inaugurated president be a lame duck on day one. He'd have to put together an administration. I think it'd be very difficult to do that. I think he's going to have a tough time recruiting really, really strong people to work in the administration. I mean, look at a lot of the people that have gone through in the first term, how that worked out for them. I mean, they've not been treated well. A lot of them have gotten involved in some of these legals. I think it's going to be very difficult. And here's the thing. As a leader, you got to have humility to know that, yes, you're the decider, you put out the vision, but you need people around you to implement that vision. You cannot do it alone, and you just have to understand. And so I would be able to attract a lot of really, really good people all across the country. And I'm not just going to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. I'm just going to recycle people from within D.C. We're going to tell people in Iowa, you're going to take your family 2, 4, 6, 8 years, come to the nation's capital, help us return this government to the American people. Come from Texas, come from Florida. We're going to be on a mission to change the country and to finally drain this swamp. And then I think just in terms of delivering on promises, I have an unblemished record on that. If I tell you I'm going to do something, I am going to do it. I'm not just gonna not. And I think if you look throughout the first term, the successes, regulatory policy, energy policy, tax, great. The wall did not get built. The swamp definitely did not get drained. And then there was no attempt even to curtail the weaponization of these agencies. No Christopher Wray wasn't fired. There was no shakeups at places like the DOJ. And so those agencies were just running. A lot of the abuses that we as conservatives complain about, like the censorship of the Hunter Biden laptop, that happened under Trump's administration. That was not Biden as president, yet that was during the campaign. That was his agencies that were colluding with that. I'd have fired those people. I'd have fired Fauci in a second once he started doing what he was doing. And so if you're conservative, you have somebody like me, I need to be told, what to do. Like Popeye said, I am what I am. My principles are my principles. That's what we're going to be using to guide us, and we're going to get the job done. It's going to be focus. It'll be discipline. I'm not going to be giving the media all this fodder. I'm not going to be, when they're shooting at you, don't respond by shooting yourself in the foot. You got to have the discipline to know that there's a larger mission. You got to be focused on the people's issues. So we'll do all that. I think we have an opportunity. This is probably the best opportunity for Republicans to change the trajectory of the country since Ronald Reagan beat Jimmy Carter in 1980. Let's not fritter it away. Let's put our best foot forward. And I'm confident that I would not have run if I didn't think I was not only the best guy, I think I'm really the only guy who could be successful in a primary, in a general, and then successfully land all these key issues so that we reverse the decline of the country.
As someone who was on the ballot last fall in 2022, 15 months ago, remember Republicans were in a bit of a death spiral, okay, in terms of the polling. I believe that Governor DeSantis saved the House to be in Republican hands by sending a plane load of illegals to Martha's Vineyard. He totally changed the landscape of the election 15 months ago. Okay, that's the kind of leadership that'll get Republicans united and helped us actually win the House of Representatives. That's what we need. And let's be very clear, in Florida, 5 years ago, would you have believed that a Republican governor would have won by 1.5 million votes? Governor DeSantis did that. He won Florida by 1.5 million votes, by what, 19%? All right, another governor, Iowa, won by 19% with leadership. And so what did we see out of that? All of the naysayers, right? All of the chattering class, all of the establishment, all of the people in Wall Street that all tell you, oh, you can't do things a certain way. Oh, you send a plane load of illegal immigrants to Martha's Vineyard, you'll lose the Hispanic vote. That didn't happen. That's not true. Governor DeSantis won 62% of the Hispanic vote in Florida. That's what leadership will do. That's what's working in South Texas, I can promise you. Governor DeSantis won 50% of single female voters. because he got Florida back to where it needs to be. It's a secure place, it's secure communities, strong economy. It's a place where people want to live. That's how we want to rally Republicans to make sure we win, not by a little. We don't want to be counting votes in Maricopa. We don't want to be counting votes in Fulton County. We want to win by millions of votes, so there's no question, and we have a landslide, and we can take our country back, and that man is Governor DeSantis.
Governor, staff tells me that, actually they told me they were going to shoot me the last question you took if I didn't get you out of here. And I see the bus keeps creeping up closer and closer to the door, so we must really be rushing right now. But thank you so much for coming. Hey, we've got an awesome choice here, don't we? We need leadership, and I think you can see we're blessed with having lots of opportunities here and great people. I appreciate you coming very much, Governor.
Merry Christmas. God bless. Appreciate it.
Thank you.